Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Owl Pod, the official podcast of Temple Athletics. I'm your host, Kevin Kopp. If you missed Tuesday's episode with David and Amelia, go check it out right here on the feed. A great conversation with Temple men's basketball point guard Jordan Mason. But our guest today is Temple fencing head coach Jennie Salmon. Coach Salmon is in her fourth season as the head coach here at Temple, having the enviable and somewhat unenviable task of following the legendary head coach Dr. Nikki Frank, who founded the Temple fencing program and coached here for 50 years. Coach Salmon was a fencer herself here at Temple under Dr. Frank, a 1995 graduate and two-time All-American, and a member of Temple Fencing's national championship team in 1992. Here is Jennie Salmon after this quick word from our Alpod sponsors.
And we're back with the action. Coke Zero Sugar might be the best Coke ever.
That's right, Jim. With an irresistible taste and zero sugar, Coke Zero Sugar is a must-try for any sports fan. So make sure you... Wait, Jim, I didn't mean try it right now. We're still on the air.
Best Coke ever? Take a taste, Jen.
Really?
No, not right now, Jen. We got a game to call.
Your Temple bio at least basically picks up with you coming to Temple, so there's a lot of gap to fill in there in terms of kind of what led you here as a fencer. So I'll let you take us back to kind of where that began. Obviously, you know, it is something of a niche sport compared to soccer or basketball or the sports that you pick up in youth. So kind of what was your childhood background and where did fencing first come into the picture?
So my childhood background athletically was really in dance. I'm one of four girls, two of which were like not really into athletics and two of which were myself and one of my older sisters. But I really gravitated at an early age towards dance. And I was one of those kids that was, you know, training 5-6 days a week, competing on weekends, taking it seriously, looking at being on Broadway. Like this was like my young girl's dream. And, you know, it was taking a lot of time and effort and money and things like that from the family as well. And I now know the story that I didn't know as a 15-year-old, but my parents had kind of hit a crossroads of where is dancing leading her? Although I was on a highly competitive team and we were successful and, you know, things were good, but I'm 5'3". And, you know, my parents had more of a like view of like, what could I do as a professional? In the sport of dance. So my father did a little reconnaissance. It just so happened that my high school had a fencing team in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey and they had varsity fencing, ironically women only, which most teams in New Jersey are dual gender, but my high school happened to only have a women's fencing team. And because my older sister did basketball and soccer and, you know, from an early age, but for me to jump into those sports would have been difficult at the age of 15 because I didn't have the background.
Sure.
So he kind of convinced me to try out for the fencing team, give it a shot. I was still totally, I'm going to be a dancer. And, you know, a lot is happenstance and it's the same getting to be at Temple that I just so happened to, my high school had a very good coach and a very robust program. And she saw very early on when I came to tryouts that I had an aptitude for the sport really because of fencing. I was very flexible, I mean, because of dancing.
Right.
I was very flexible. I could take, in many ways, fencing is choreography, repetitive moves that form a pattern. And so I picked up on aspects very quickly. So within like my second week in the high school team, she had already convinced my dad to get me to a private coach, and who was her coach when she was a collegiate athlete. So, you know, it was just a whirlwind. So we went there, I started taking lessons. His name is John Moss. I still see him today. He was very connected and knew Coach Frank, Nikki, very well. And his story is that after our first lesson, when I was only 15, he called Nikki and said, I have an athlete for you in 3 years.
Wow.
And this is her name, and you're going to see her. So I don't know if that's how much that is folklore and how much that is true, but that's the story that's been told. But I didn't know anything about that. I just really loved fencing right away. I loved the challenge of it. I had some early success, you know, that also obviously made me like the sport because I had some earlier success than maybe others would have. So there was a year where I tried to balance dance and fencing, and then I chose fencing. I decided to hang up my, shoes, my dance shoes, and really focus 100% on this sport. At that time, I mean, you say it's a niche sport, but at that time, even more niche.
Sure.
Women only fenced foil. It was very unusual to be able to have a high school program, but it's just so happened New Jersey did. One of like a few states that had varsity fencing, at the high school level. So I was able to, accelerate, I guess, in the sport, because starting at 15 back then wasn't unusual. Nowadays, if you don't start much earlier, you're not going to be successful enough to have the path I did, which was to eventually be recruited to Temple University on a full athletic scholarship and fence here for 4 years. So the athletes I work with now have been fencing much longer and have much more breadth of experience. And I've always said, I think part of my success was because I started so late, I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to succeed all the, so it's a little bit of the ignorance helped me be successful. But yeah, and so that eventually led me to Temple. I know Nikki did find me when I was old enough to be of a recruitable age. She approached me, and, we started the conversation, and, I think things worked out really well in the end.
Well, certainly. I mean, it's funny to think now if you, if you kind of turn that story forward and someone calls you and says, hey, I've got someone, they just picked up a foil 2 weeks ago, and they're a high school sophomore, but they're going to be great. You'd hang up the phone probably. So it's just funny to see how that worked out.
But I will say, she's a first year this year, and one of the things that she's been fencing a little less with less experience than some of the other girls, but she is a dancer and she's an athlete. And so that really attracted me to her. I was
That's
like,
really
you can do
interesting.
something in this sport.
Yeah. I mean, that also takes a pretty pragmatic streak of yours to be 15 and to have this love of dance and to, I know you've had that period of trying to do both, but it sounds like, I mean, I guess the success in fencing helped, but that's got to be hard to let go of, anything that you pick up as a child and do, 15-year-old boy, girl, whatever is not going to be, I know that I wasn't taking the long-term, practical view of certain things at that age. So that's, a pretty pragmatic streak on your part.
Yeah, I mean, my parents, particularly my father, were really planting the seeds. They were saying, obviously we support you and we love you. There's no such thing as like a full dance scholarship, because unless you go to Juilliard or something, right? So,
right.
There's avenues for your success through this sport. And there was for them that piece of like, where will it take me? But yeah, I don't know the level of manipulation I received in my household at that time, but it was subtle.
All's well that ends well, I guess.
Yes, all's well that ends well. My dad takes great pride, and like, you wouldn't be where you are today if I hadn't kind of navigated or choreographed a little bit of your high school career.
Well, that's what we try to do as parents. You try to steer them with the lightest touch possible, but hope that they come to the conclusion on their own. So it's good that worked out.
It's true, because I never felt like I had to, or that I had no choice. So that was good.
Right, and you probably would have pushed against it if you did. So, it ends well. So, yeah, I think the gender thing is really interesting too, as you noted. All-female high school team, and then coming to Temple, which is unusual as a Division I program in that it is women only. And so was that part of the attraction for you, or was that just the relationship with Coach Frank was kind of over and above, and that was just, a neat way that it lined up with what you were already experiencing, or what were the benefits and the drawbacks from that standpoint? Because just for folks that are listening that don't know, for all intents and purposes, the top teams, the top programs, and now, because of the way, or at least up until the present day, the way that you've had to compete is that it's a combined men's and women's, and in the current or in the recent modern era of collegiate fencing, there is no practical chance of winning a national championship unless you have both the men's and women's side of competition. So how did that factor or not factor into your decision?
Well, it's interesting because actually you wouldn't know this, but they did just for starting this season reinstitute the women's championship.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Recent modern. Yeah. I probably didn't explain that well.
Modern,
so
but,
yes.
Well, I think for me, I'm sure that the women only aspect of Temple fencing felt familiar to me. And so whereas other people being recruited might come in with the thought of that it's different, I didn't really have that thought. Not that I I was recruited by Penn and Notre Dame and some other top programs. And the fact that they were dual gender also didn't sit poorly with me. But I think it felt very familiar. But the primary thing that brought me to Temple was the opportunity to be part of such a historical program, and also work with Coach Frank. I had at that time aspirations to continue to fence outside of college at a national level, make world teams and things like that. So I needed to be in a place where I felt that I could get that type of training. I also just totally vibed with Philly. I love Philly. I love the aspect, like being in the city, and it just felt right to me. So I think that those two things went really well together. But yeah, the idea back then when I was being recruited, they did then have a women's national championship, foil only.
Right.
So we knew we had a chance, and we were able to make it happen, while I was at Temple. But yeah, I don't think I was thinking championships and things like that. I was really thinking like being part of something that is really special, being with coaches that are really dedicated and talented themselves. And like I said, Philly, I love the Philly vibe.
Well, tell me about, obviously, Coach Frank is she's inextricably linked to the program. She's been on the podcast. We've had her story. It's funny because she basically now, she has the legendary status baked in, right? 50 years as the head coach. Not to say that she wasn't then. She had already been an Olympian and a world-level fencer and had done so much with the Temple program. But I think you do have an interesting perspective getting to see her while she was still a part of the building, and you and your teammates were a part of the build of that legend. She's kind of deified now, but what was the experience like of just being a student athlete and having her as a coach, and what life was like in Temple fencing in the early to mid 90s?
I feel that a lot of it remains the experience and the standard of what I had. As I've said, like, we were all in the same weapon. So we were really, really connected. We all trained all the time together. One of the things that has expanded with the incoming of 3 weapons for women is a much more conscious effort to make sure those bonds are built across weapons and things like that I think happen really naturally with our team. But I think that we do a good job with that within the program. I am still super close and connected to my teammates from when I was at Temple. It's been 30 plus years of being a competitor in the program. And that's really the thing that I remember is, the good, the bad, the times together, those memories. Yeah, the big bouts and the big moments, but those relationships have lasted, which I think is something that, Nikki found that formula, that secret sauce that we had to transcend just being athletes together. And it's sustained the program, and it's why people, the legend is what it is because you still have people engaged in it.
Now, that 1992 national championship, was that your freshman year?
That was my sophomore year.
Okay, I'm trying to do the math. 95 graduate. So sophomore year.
Yeah, so I did a 5-year program.
Okay.
I got like a triple certification in education. So yeah.
There you go. So that experience, I imagine. You're 2-time All-American, all of these great accolades, but I can't imagine that anything, at least at the collegiate level, competes with being able to win a team national championship. And again, because we've dove into the format at this time for women or foil only, but that is the national championship. When you win foil, we say 1992 foil championship, that's the national championship.
That's the NCAA championship.
We'll get to kind of how the format has evolved and changed back this year, I think, clearly for the better. But, that experience of winning that national title, I imagine just it can't possibly get any better than that.
Absolutely. We say sport is a metaphor for life. And that moment, we were by a very large margin underdogs. We were solidly the top number 2 team in the country. And we had lost earlier that season. We beat Penn State for the championship. We had lost to them. There were 16 bouts back then, 4 per starter, 4 bouts. And we had lost 14-2 to them. But we knew about 8 of those bouts we lost by 1 touch. So functionally, we were 8 touches away from beating them. But on paper, it looked like,
they
there's
don't
second
belong.
and there's first.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had that plan and that confidence, and we knew, and we were training to correct those mistakes and capitalize on maybe moments we missed within different bouts that we knew we had to take advantage of. And, you know, knowing what I know as a coach now, maybe that was the smartest thing we ever did, was let them beat us 14-2 earlier in the season, because maybe a little bit of overconfidence, maybe a little bit of, you know, and we just hit the ground running and never looked back and fought and fought and fought. And we actually got a good lead on them, and they were climbing back in. And back then, because there were 16 bouts, you could tie 8-8. And then it would go to touches, in what's called an indicator in fencing, but it's touches scored and touches received. And we knew if it went to 8-8, we had lost, because we were winning our bouts like 5-4. They had a few like big wins. So we knew we have to get to 9. And we got down to being 8-7. And the last bout, the legendary Muna Batar, my teammate, she brought it home for us. But that moment was incredible. And it's something definitely that has shaped my life. I didn't leave college to become a fencing coach. I went right into my career in education. I didn't know that this would, you know, certainly didn't conceive that I would be back here at Temple, you know, coaching back then. But it definitely shaped my worldview, my, you know, I've been like just being tenacious, always believing. I like to be the underdog. I think it's a great position to be in, because you have nothing to lose. And so, yeah, it's a key moment. Occasionally when I'm here, I see the video. It gets played at different events, so the grainy video of us climbing the podium. And every time I get choked up, and I'm just like, oh, my God, can't believe that happened.
It is remarkable, and it's amazing that it was, you know, there's so many great moments in the history of Temple, and, you know, working in this field, we produce videos, and there's so many that the video doesn't exist, and thank goodness someone had probably some this gigantic, clunky, yeah, exactly, the full, you know, over-the-shoulder camcorder that probably weighed 60 pounds, you know, recording it on VHS. Thank goodness that you know, exists, because it is such a treat.
It's so different now. Like, we were literally in an auxiliary gym at Notre Dame. It could have been like a high school basketball gym, you know, with strips set up, and there's like the raggedy bleachers. But that was fencing, you know, like and now if you look at the championships and the production and how amazing it is, we didn't have that, but we didn't think we were missing anything. Right. Because the strip is the same, and the sport is the same. Yeah.
Well, I think that is the exact type of attitude that suits you very well here at Temple, is that, you know, that's Temple personified. And you set me up perfectly. I wanted to talk about, obviously, so you get a degree in early childhood, elementary, and special education, and go right into teaching. So coaching was not the path, but I imagine, as obviously the path is going to eventually lead to you coaching and coaching here at Temple, I imagine in the same way that kind of the dance background set you up well as a fencer, I have to imagine that the teaching background really sets you up in the same way for coaching.
Yeah, definitely. And I would particularly say my degree in special education helps a lot, because so much of that is about being able to differentiate your instruction to meet the needs and the strengths and weaknesses of any individual. And within fencing, it's a sport where, you know, there's no height limit, there's no weight class, there's no, you know, you can have a 5 foot tall athlete fencing a 6'5" athlete. I experienced fencing athletes who were over a foot taller than me, right? So you have to have ways, and you have to really work those aptitudes. So I think that really helped me, like, embrace every athlete I worked with for decades as a club coach. Moving into collegiate coaching, you're getting athletes from all different places around the country and the world with different coaching styles, and you have to be able to make them feel comfortable and confident in what they're bringing in the door and build on it. So I would say, yeah, I was lucky that I had that bridge.
What got you back into coaching? Because it looks like, did you start at high school and then pretty quickly thereafter pick up the club coaching as well? Did both of those things kind of happen somewhat simultaneously?
As soon as I left, you know, graduated from Temple and started teaching, I right away jumped into volunteer stuff, which means doing, you know, going to maybe a boys and girls club, or within the school I was teaching, doing gym classes. Like, I always was bringing fencing to people, but it was more like hit or miss here and there, like where I could find an opportunity. I went down to the 96 Olympics. I had several friends that had made the team, and I went down, and because it was in Atlanta, it was so great. Went down, worked at the fencing venue as a volunteer myself. And that's where I met my husband. And, he was a Penn State fencer, but he's a little older than me, so we hadn't met in college. And he was already founding a high school program on Long Island. And basically through that relationship, and that it ended up being a permanent relationship, when I moved to Long Island, picked up coaching, actually the first year volunteer coaching with him at the high school program that he had got taken from club to varsity. We, even at that time, we founded our club, Mission Fencing Center, as a volunteer type of thing, just a place for kids to go and fence. But we just hit such a quick success level at the high school level that it just grew. And then it went from a side gig to, I'm going to step back. Also, I had a lot of things. I had my daughters, like a lot of things were happening together. But we stepped back and we made it our full-time endeavor to bring fencing to our students. And our mission was to teach our students to a level of success where they could be recruited to the college programs of their choice and share a similar experience that him and I both had in our collegiate fencing careers. And for some of our athletes, we had athletes make world teams. We had athletes, go even further than that. But the crux of what we have is dozens and dozens, and I'm sure over 100 athletes from our program have fenced up for all sorts of different collegiate teams.
And then at what point, because obviously that is so incredibly fulfilling, and I think it is different when you get them at that age. It's just, it's a different developmental period. Not to say that doesn't happen in college, but there is a different level of, growth and maturity and just some of the things, the life aspect of it, both on and off the strip when you're developing athletes like that. At what point did you decide that, coaching at the collegiate level and you start at Brandeis was the next kind of step in the journey?
So, my husband, Jeff, and I had always discussed that we would love for our fencing journey to circle back to college someday, because that is really, for both of us, what inspired us to really pursue it as a career. But it came a little early. It wasn't at the exact time, because my daughters were a little younger than I would have liked when I first started. But you can't, like, when positions come, they don't know. It's not like other sports that are larger where every year there's dozens of potential opportunities. The position at Brandeis, I didn't even myself think of applying for it right away. And so many people within the USA fencing community were reaching out to me and saying, Jennie, you need to go for this. Brandeis was a historical program. The head coach there, Bill Shipman, had been there 37 years. There was somewhat of we have to protect this program and make sure someone comes in who's going to steward it in a way that should be. And so I applied thinking, well, it'll be a good experience for me to go through the application process.
Right. Yeah.
And, it's good to try and see. And so fast forward, we made the decision as a family that this was something worth pursuing. And actually, Coach Frank really encouraged me to take the position. And I'm pretty sure because she was planning, I know what I want in the future, and I need this girl to have something on her resume.
we got to make sure that she's a viable candidate when the time comes.
So maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah, once again, the strings being pulled, but it works out perfectly.
I feel like a little bit of my life, there's puppeteers.
Right. Yeah. Guardian angels looking out for you, really, is yes. I think the positive
That's a good
spin
way
there.
To look at it.
Yeah. Well, you do come to Temple. You succeed Coach Frank, and I imagine. And I know that we talked, I think probably the day you were introduced and hired, we sat down together, and I'm sure that opportunity coming up is at once a no-brainer and on the flip side of the coin incredibly intimidating to follow. You kind of want to be the person that follows the person, right, as the saying goes. But coming in and inheriting this program from Coach Frank, just what was all of the mental side of it for you coming into this position that I'm sure had to be a dream job, and the thing that you would have, set your sights on, but also, okay, now it's incredibly real, and I am the person that's actually trying to do this and keep this program going?
Yeah. I think I was a little naive because I think I thought it would be like more of a seamless thing than it naturally was, because over the years the relationship with Nikki had really developed. Like, we'd see each other, we talked all the time. I was a fan of the team. When I was at meets with Brandeis and we weren't fencing, I'm always over looking at the Temple team. So I felt that I knew these girls. I've been watching them fence. Nikki and I had chatted about different aspects of coaching and fencing, and so I felt like I was ready to, just come in and be like, all right, ladies, I know what this is. I lived it with you, the traditions and the things, like, I'm part of that. So let's go. And then it was learning, how to integrate myself with athletes who I quickly realized didn't necessarily know me, even though I'd seen them so many times. And I knew it when one of them asked me early, like, did you ever fence at NCAAs? And I went, okay, that's
Yes.
These girls, like, it's okay, it's fine. But I was like, yeah, a couple times.
Yeah, somewhat famously, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that was a little bit of, a good thing for me to kind of take a step back and open it up a little, because I think I just hit the ground running, like, all right, last week you were doing this warm up, let's do it again and let's go. And I had to that first year was really about just building, relationships with the athletes.
Is that the biggest thing that you feel like has evolved for you just in the 4 years now that you've been here? And obviously, I mean, the success has continued, and the, regional competition, the NIWFA conference championship. I mean, so much of the kind of tangible markers have continued, but do you feel like from that kind of interpersonal and relationship building and the, that side of things, has that been the biggest evolution for you in the time that you've been here?
Yeah, I think definitely it has been, and it's been a lot of really, good things have come from it. Even some changes within the way we do things have grown through it, and I think that's been helpful. So yeah, I think absolutely it always will be. As now it's the 4th year, things are pretty seamless.
Yeah.
As with any sports team, athletes come in, they graduate, new people come in. So it's always a work in progress, but at the core is that we're a family. Temple fencing is a family, which means you got to live with each other, whether you like it or not, in those tough moments, but also, like, we have each other's backs. We're working hard together. One of the things that has come into the program since I've been here is this mantra, together determined, and always pulling ourselves back to that together we are stronger than any other entity that we're going to face. And that came from, I just so happened right before we fenced Columbia, my second year, which is number 1 or number 2 team in women's fencing. And we had our meet with them. And I said, we have to stay from first to last together determined today. And for some reason, I flipped determined together to together determined. And then we went and beat them. So I was like, all right, guess what?
It stays.
We're going to keep this one. And even today, I did a cheer with the foil squad. And my foil squad leader, Renee, said, I really want to do like a together determined cheer today. And that just came out of having a really good practice. So that was cool.
That's really nice. And I do want a little detour. I know we've kind of touched obliquely on this, but a little bit of inside baseball as to how the championship has evolved. Again, to go back to your time where women only competed foil, but that was a national championship in and of itself. Then at some point thereafter, it gets all kind of muddled together. And I think, I don't know, at least in my outside perspective, you don't combine the results of the men's and women's swimming and diving championships and say, okay, now we have a swimming and diving champion. I don't know why it makes any more sense in fencing than any other sport, but they have now split men's and women's back apart. And I'm just wondering, what does that have any psychological effect now that you kind of have gone into these seasons knowing, because of the structure, we have individuals that are going to be, capable of competing for championships, but as a team, we're kind of boxed out because of the structure. Mm-hmm. Does it change now that there is an opportunity to have a women's fencing championship, just in terms of, I don't know, the mindset, or that you have a different goal that's out there for this team to achieve? Does that change anything or not really?
I think it does change things that the team wants to like say we're going to compete for the national championship, which we never could before. Since I think it was 95 that they made their change to the combined. Functionally, the championship structure hasn't changed. So it's still in our sport that we fence team the entire season. But at the championships, it's individuals qualify, and it won't be the combined of the men and women's results. It'll just be the combined of the women's epee, foil, and saber result will be the championship. So we face the same challenges of qualifying. If you can qualify up to 6 athletes, 2 per weapon to championships. The teams that will be in contention are going to be the ones that qualify 5 and 6 athletes. Being in what I believe is the deepest, strongest region, we face quite a challenge to even get our athletes through to championships. So we'll probably see teams we beat have athletes at championships where in weapons where we may not. So for us, for myself and the other coaches, it still goes back to working hard with the team that is here, working to recruit strong athletes who fit our culture and our program. And I have a hope that someday they go, and I'm working as well as I can within the structures of the NCAA and to work to bring squad championships to our sport so that there is that opportunity more to represent the team structure that we fence all year at championships.
Well, it is strange because you look at basically the way that you have your championship run is like swimming and track, where you're going to have it's the sum total of the points that individuals are able to accumulate. But the thing is with swimming and track, that's how their meets work during the season. That's how you win a meet is your individual and you're accumulating points. It's as if, gymnastics, which has a head-to-head competition all season, suddenly said, okay, but for our championship, you're just going to go to a regional meet and qualify, and we're just going to take the top scores of your, 2 or 3 athletes in each event, and that's your national champion. I do think the sport suffers for it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of it's been like this for decades, but it is a head scratcher in some ways, because what happens at championships doesn't always represent the actual strength of a team's season and what they've actually accomplished. Now, getting to championships is incredible. We Temple athletes get there, they compete well, and that, we're always striving to continue that success. And we're going to work within the structure that exists the very best we can, continue to push and be one, the top team. And then, I just would also love for all collegiate athletes to experience, because functionally my championship in 1992 was a squad championship, right? Because it was only foil.
Yep.
And having that moment with your teammates fencing and creating upsets that shouldn't exist, like that's sport. That's what happens. Yes. It doesn't matter on paper who's supposed to win and who's not supposed to win. Who does it in the moment, and that's Temple fencing, because we're known for, making that upset, winning that bout that you're not supposed to win, winning that meet that should have gone the other way on paper, because we are Temple tough. We never lose because we're tired. We come in as strong athletes in the room, and we are together determined, I'll say. So, I think that the team, they reacted positively, very excited about the women's championship. So I'm very curious to see at regionals this year and as we head into the postseason, as you said, how the mentality and the mindset is shifted a little bit, just with the thought of that opportunity, even though the format hasn't changed.
Oh, we hope that the sport continues to, I think, move in the right direction, but I hope that your behind the scenes efforts bear some fruit eventually, because I do think, again, anyone that hasn't had the chance to come out and see fencing in person, you're missing out on. It's a tremendous event. The energy is spectacular. It's always it would just, at its core, it would be, I think, a great. We've seen the way that so many sports that didn't used to be marketed and didn't used to be visible on television have just exploded in recent years, particularly women's sports. And I think that fencing, if you had the right structure, is ripe for that kind of explosion in popularity. And so I do encourage everyone to come on out to McGonigal at the end of February 20, I want to get the date right. 22nd this year.
22nd.
All-day event, free admission. Come on out to McGonigal and see Temple Fence because it really is just, it's a treat. And I do want to, you said something that I thought was really interesting just about the mindset and the mentality in Temple Tough that I think is a great point to bring this all back to. And one of the things that I'm really interested in that we've talked about a lot in these interviews is someone like yourself who came up through Temple at a time where it really was all about that underdog mentality and that grit, and it's personified in that 1992 team. I do think there is some tension as we enter 2026 and just with the state of collegiate athletics and the way things are, that sometimes that tough, gritty underdog mentality, it's harder now with a different generation of student athletes, but you seem to have unlocked the bridge in those two things, and you're able to hold both of those together in a sport where you're competing against the Notre Dames and the Ivies of the world, that Temple still has an identity and that the students that come here are still willing to embrace that, I think is really encouraging, because I think in a lot of ways we've sometimes strayed from that, but it sounds like you've been able to kind of hold all of that together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, like things have changed and the athletes have changed in different ways, and the skill levels are so amazing now in the sport of fencing. So the opportunities for these athletes are much, much broader than they've ever been. But we're still, Temple Tough facing, as you said, Ivy League schools, Stanford, Notre Dame, Duke, UNC. And so we walk in the room. One of the things I loved last year is that we all got Jordans. And I loved walking in the room with our black sweats and our Jordans and just announcing, like, we're Temple Tough. Let's go. So we are, I guess, as challenging as our path is to face, other very, very strong teams with, different resources, different things happening. We get the benefit of not having such a feeling of the change in NCAA sports that's happening. We still get to be gritty, tough Temple within our sport. So I think that that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. We are so happy to have one of our own back here leading this program, which has been enmeshed in the history of collegiate fencing. And it's great to see the way that you've been able to carry it forward, and wish you all the success the rest of this season and moving forward. Want to remind everyone, February 22nd, Sunday, all day at McGonigal Hall. Come on out, check out the Temple Invitational. The next week, this team competes for, is it number 29 in a row? Do I have the number right? NIWFA?
30.
30 this year.
Number
30, a nice round number, no pressure.
Yes, everybody called me when I first came to Temple. Hey, Jenny, welcome home. No pressure.
No pressure. We've won at that. I guess at that time would have been 26 straight. So you've had 27,
26, yeah.
27, 28, 29, and we go for 30 in February, and then the NCAA regionals and championships in the month of March. So a lot to follow along with. But this has been so great getting to hear your story, and again, just best of luck moving forward.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, that's this week's episode of the Owl Pod. I want to thank my guest, Temple Fencing head coach Jennie Salmon. A reminder, David Litvin and Amelia Wright are back on the Tuesday edition of the Owl Pod with an all-new episode. I'll be back with you next Friday. As a reminder, if you want to support the Owl Pod, please be sure to subscribe, leave a rating. Most of all, please tell your friends. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, owlsports.com, anywhere you get your podcasts. And, of course, follow us on Instagram at the Owl Podcast. Special thanks to our Owl Pod team, Christy Bannon, Justin Miller, Prince Moody, our executive producer, Dan Lobaz. I'm Kevin Kopp. Thank you all so much for listening, everyone, and go Owls.